You guys can go ahead and be seated. I am glad that with this being my third week, I don't have to open the same way and say thank you for braving the weather as I have the last 2 weeks, although you may have still had to cross some things that didn't used to be rivers but are rivers now. With all the rain. It just so happens that we're going to be talking about Noah today. So it was not intentional for all the rain. It just worked out that way. And really, I think the story of Noah sometimes becomes all about the flood versus about Noah himself. But we're going to learn a little bit about Noah, talk a little bit about Noah, and then kind of wrap up what we've been talking about the last couple weeks with the favor of God. I do want to read this to you to begin. We've talked about some different ways that the favor of God is misinterpreted or ways that people think you receive the favor of God. While Googling the favor of God, how to obtain the favor of God, I came across this blog. As God's child, you are lawfully in line to be favored and promoted this year. Yes. Never forget this. When the devil attacks you, God will always promote you. Your hour of promotion has come. Your time for favor has come. Just release your faith and divine favor will invade your finances. Guaranteed. All you've lost will be restored. Guaranteed. All the enemy has taken from you is coming back double. Guaranteed. Total restoration and recovery are coming your way. Guaranteed. You've had losses, trials, pain, but you've been in the valley too long. You will get back on top. Guaranteed. All you have to do is release your faith. As you serve him and give to his work, you ensure the Lord's favor on your life. The Word of God promises that only the giver is favored with his blessing. This blessing on givers is repeated over and over again. My partner, my heart beats with passionate faith for you, for I know that your season and your time for favor has come. God has placed this message on my heart. Favor is all about timing. It's all about the righteous season. And I know in the Spirit, this is your season. This is your time for divine favor. So today, sow your seed for spreading the gospel of Jesus Christ with explosive faith. Please click the link below to donate now. So, it turns out that maybe the favor of God is still something that we're struggling with, is still something that we believe is these exterior things like promotions and like finances and like getting back double whatever we believe has been taken from us. So we're going to look at one more individual from the Bible this morning who specifically is indicated having the favor of God. We started with Mary, and we saw a couple things that she had that we believe were significant for having the favor of God. She had humility and she had priority, in that she still couldn't figure out why God had chosen her. And yet when the angel came and spoke to her, she said, "Let it be just as you have said." She prioritized what God was leading her to do, or how God was going to be using her. We talked about Abram last week and how he was a man of action, and that he also spent time honoring God and adoring the relationship and the covenant that he had. And so this morning we're going to wrap up with Noah. So Noah, we're going to read part of his story in chapter 6. And we are going to read chapter 6, verses 5 through 12. If you are using the Pew Bible, you have to turn all the way to page 6. And this doesn't start the chapter. We'll pick up on verse 5, but the chapter has the subheading of wickedness in the world. So we'll start on verse 5. The Lord saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. The Lord regretted that he had made human beings on the earth, and his heart was deeply troubled. So the Lord said, I will wipe from the face of the earth the human race I have created, and with them the animals, the birds, and the creatures that move along the ground, for I regret that I have made them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. This is the account of Noah and his family. Noah was a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time, and he walked faithfully with God. Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight and was full of violence. God saw how corrupt the earth had become, for all the people on earth had corrupted their ways. The last verse there, verse 12. If we're reading this in the King James Version, it says this, and God looked upon the earth, and behold, it was corrupt. And that is almost the antithesis of what we read just 5 chapters before. Because in Genesis 1, we read, and God saw everything that he had made on the earth, and behold, it was very good. At the end of creation, when God is done, when he's getting ready for his day of rest, he reflects and sees that it was very good. And yet, 5 chapters later, we've moved into the life of Noah. God looks upon the earth, and behold, it was corrupt. And you can read about some of the things that were likely going on during that time. But I think something that really stuck out to me is the Lord regretted that he had made human beings on the earth. And when you look at the word regretted, what it means is that God took a heavy sigh. And I think about the things in my life that when I've seen them or when I've heard about them, that it has caused me to take a heavy sigh. And it's really about disappointment and kind of, when you talk about your heart hurting, like it causes pain that's not specifically in your heart, but that's almost your entire body. Like, I really wish that hadn't happened. And I think about reflecting on that and what God must have seen that caused him to take a heavy sigh. And we look at Noah, and in verse 8, Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. So we want to look at Noah and see what it was about him that allowed him or that caused him to find the favor of God. And so you read right there after that in verse 9, Noah was a righteous man. I tried to find, what righteous men, and it's got this super deep meaning or anything like that. It's not. It's being right with God. It's righteous. We read in Isaiah that God is completely righteous, and we cannot attain righteousness on our own. And yet we read in here that Noah was a righteous man. So a little bit of a conflict there. Noah's righteous, but Isaiah tells us that we can't obtain righteousness on our own. It also says that Noah was blameless. When you go through and you read and look for the word blameless in the Bible, you find it a couple places. When God has his covenant with Abram and he changes his name to Abraham, God asks Abraham to live a blameless life. We also see Job described. When God is talking to Satan, he says, "See my servant Job," and he references that Job is blameless. We also see in some of David's Psalms, he talks about he was able to, through his relationship with God, stay away from sin, and he was blameless. And so I thought originally reading this, Noah maybe was just like a pretty good guy in comparison to the corrupt world. So, he was just like okay, but when you compare yourself to terrible people, you look a lot better all of a sudden. But when we look at descriptions like righteous and blameless, that's not the case at all. But the big takeaway, the only reason Noah has the ability to be righteous, the only reason that Noah has the ability to be blameless is the end of verse 9. And he walked faithfully with God. Just a chapter before, we learn about a man named Enoch who walked faithfully with God. And there's very little description about Enoch other than he walked faithfully with God and he was no more. So something about this faithful walk prevented Enoch from having to go through death. Actually, the word there in his story is Enoch was translated. He was no more. He was on earth and he was gone. He was translated to heaven. And if I were guessing, I would imagine that his walk on earth was exactly like his walk on heaven, and thus the word translated. So instead of walking faithfully with God on earth, Enoch was just walking faithfully with God in heaven. And I think if we are going to look at the favor of God and how we receive the favor of God, it's not the 5 steps from the article we read the first week. It's not something that should be confused as if we give to the right person and if we say the right words and if we do this checklist of things. To receive the favor of God is about walking faithfully with God. It's about doing what he asks you to do. And this rain and these storms that have lasted forever have led me to have numerous experiences with what it means to walk faithfully with James. So James is 4.5, and there are an immense number of puddles in Murray Hill. When James is walking right by my side, sometimes holding hands, sometimes not holding hands, we begin to walk up to a puddle, and he looks up at me, and I look down at him. I don't even have to say anything. I just, okay. Walks, and he'll walk around the puddle, or he'll go, sometimes I'll let him walk through the puddle real slowly or everything like that. But if he gets too far ahead of me, he comes up to the puddle and he starts looking back. The ultimate, like when people say you got a twinkle in your eye, like I can foresee where this is going. He can foresee where this is going. He is really going to be able to jump 2 feet and make a huge mess. But as long as I'm not too far from me and he can look back and see me, I can still say, James, should you jump in that puddle? No. Okay, so he'll walk around or he'll walk slowly through it. But when he gets too far away, he's going to jump in the puddle. He might jump in it twice really quick so he can get all the jump out before I start hollering at him. And I think about that with my relationship with God. When I am close to God, when I'm walking faithfully with God, things that I don't have any business doing might look really attractive. I might have that twinkle in my eye, I think this would just be okay. I mean, it doesn't rain all the time. I can jump in this puddle this one time. But the farther I get, the less worried I am about him, the less likely I'm to look back and see, is this a good decision? Is this a bad decision? Should I make this jump? Should I go into this situation? But when I'm right next to him, when I'm involved in a relationship where I know my first thought should be to look, should be to see, like James knows when he's walking close, Dad, can I jump in this one? And, I don't want to make you think that I'm like a horrible dad. Like, he's got rain boots. There are times we go out and stomp around in the puddles and make splash and everything like that. But we're ready for it. We're prepared for it. It's not like on the way to church this morning. And so when I think about the favor of God, I really think it comes down to three things. I think when we talk about the favor of God, when God gives us, provides for us his favor, I think there are three things. I think number one, it's the relationship. It's the fact that as the greatest, most powerful creator force in the universe, he desires to interact with us. He wants us to have a relationship with it. It's not like he's, just like, hey, take it or leave it. Like, it is his desire for us to be in right relationship with him, each one of us individually. It's not like he sees us as humankind. We're all individual. He knows us specifically. And the fact that he desires and chooses to have a relationship with us is part of that favor. I think about Mary and Noah and Abram. God had a relationship with each of those individuals, and it was that relationship that was significant to them. It was a relationship that they prioritized and that they wanted to build. I think the second thing is grace. God gives us grace. God gives us forgiveness. God gives us multiple opportunities, even when we don't want to give that to ourselves. Even when we struggle giving that to other people. There's not a point at which God's up on the whiteboard and he's like, oh, that was your last shot. Good try. I'll move on to the next person. He is always, through that relationship, open and willing to welcome us back, to make sure that we know that he's available with that grace and with that forgiveness. I, as a parent, have lots of stories of kids, and I know that one of the things that I struggle with is that when I am not in right relationship with God, that makes me more likely to snap when Emily and James do something that frustrates me. That makes me more likely to have a negative interaction with Aaron. That makes me more likely at work to be frustrated with the students or with the teachers. And so I see that really the grace that I have the ability to share with others is so much based on that relationship that I have with God. So not only is it a part that God is sharing that grace with us, but it's through that sharing that we can do the same thing for other people. That we can do our best to model for other people what God offers us. And I think the final thing when we talk about the favor of God is peace. All you got to do is flip on your most favorite news show, or maybe your least favorite news show, to see the lack of peace in the lives of people. And what God provides for us is in the middle of the storm, when stuff is going crazy, when people are hollering, when you don't understand what's going on, you have the understanding, you have the ability to reflect upon when all else goes wrong, God is there. God is willing, God is able to provide that peace, to provide that rock, to provide the place we can always go back to and know when I don't understand, I know God. When it doesn't make any sense, I know God. When everything seems to be falling apart, I know God. So when it comes to the favor of God, it all starts with walking faithfully. Because when you're walking faithfully, you're aware of that grace. You're reflecting, you're sharing that grace. You're experiencing the peace. And oftentimes, that peace in the tough times allows you to have conversations with people when they don't have peace and you do, and they want to know why you're not freaking out. Do you know what's about to happen? Or maybe the scarier thing, I don't know what's about to happen. But I know God. And I know peace. And I know that regardless of what the situation is, He's there. I was in the classroom probably my 5th or 6th year and struggling with some of my high schoolers and kind of, getting a little tired of teaching and being burnt out and trying to figure out why 14-year-olds were so aggravating. And I remember a conversation with my mom, and we were talking about classroom management and trying to make sure that kids were working and doing what they needed to do. And she was teaching kindergarten at the time and suggested that I should just treat them like kindergartners, and give them stamps and give them stickers and do all this kind of stuff. And I was like, thanks, Mom. It's the dumbest idea I've ever heard in my life. They're 14. They don't want to be treated like 5-year-olds. Wow, was I wrong. You know what they love? Stamps, stickers, 2 thumbs up. They want structure and consistency. They will never tell you that. But when you set up your classroom and students walk in, and on the left side of the board is the agenda, and on the right side of the board is the 2 questions they're working on, and that's going to take a timer, and it's going to take 8 minutes, and when 8 minutes are done, you walk around and you give them a rock star stamp if they got it, and you don't give them a rock star stamp if they don't got it. They all got it in the first week because they want the rock star stamp. And then you do your 15 minutes of notes, and then you do your classwork, and then you do your this, and they have a notebook, and you get them into a structure and into a routine, and that's what happens. And then you don't realize until you come in late one day, or until you didn't get your coffee or something like that, and you don't have the agenda on the left side of the board, or you flip it, you put the agenda on the right side of the board and the question on the left, and they walk in and they're like, whoa, Mr. Stuckey, I don't know what's going on, but that goes over there and that goes over there, so I'm going to need you to change that. And it's the repetition and the understanding that when you have consistency, it's really easy to figure out when something is inconsistent. Because this always went here and this always went here. And so when you are walking faithfully with God, as you start to get too far ahead or too far behind, you should feel it. You should say, something's not right. I'm not supposed to speak like that at them. I'm not supposed to act like that. I'm not supposed to be doing what I just did or what I'm thinking about doing. This is inconsistent with my walk with God. But if you get a little bit further ahead and inconsistency becomes the norm, you forget what it's like. And then you come back to structure and you're like, oh, I don't like this anymore, it's structure. Oh, I got to do this. It doesn't matter. Do I really have to do it in 8 minutes? I could do it in 10 minutes. It's all the same thing, as long as I get the right answer. But it's the structure. It's the walking faithfully that allows you to share the love, the grace, the forgiveness, the peace that God offers us. And so what I was really convicted with this week is that I need to try to be more like a kindergartner in my relationship with God. I need to stop trying to be a high schooler. I need to stop saying, I've outgrown those things. I can handle some of this on my own. Give me a little more rope. Give me a little more leeway. I need more flexibility. I need to stop being a teenager. I need to go back to that dependent relationship, to know that every time I look up at God, He looks back down at me and smiles. That every time I ask a question, He's right there to hear it. Doesn't mean He's always going to answer it. But when I'm walking faithfully, when I have that relationship with God, I have security. I have peace. And as we look at the world around us, the favor of God is right in front of us. Don't have to click the link to donate now. Don't have to read a bunch of crazy articles that confuse you. You accept the invitation to be a child of God, and you walk faithfully with Him on the dry sidewalks and in the puddles. Let's pray.